The Sweet Sound of Success show is brought to you by the Mentor Studio. The Mentor Studio is an exclusive mentoring and training program for social influencers, business owners, entrepreneurs, coaches, and startups, bringing personal development to the underserved around the world. And brought to you by Success Strategists. Simple strategies that work to develop your business with flow and ease using proven strategies and the right tactics. This is the Sweet Sound of Success with Sue Wilhite, Profit Attraction Master.
Anke Herrmann is an online tech and business mentor, author of Taming the Tech Monster. She's a podcaster and proudly owned by 3 dogs. Yay for dogs. In 2004, she quit her software developer job in the UK to start her own business in Spain. Today, she helps visionary coaches work in their genius zone and magnify their impact through smart online tech and systems. Welcome, Anke. This is so cool. I get a techie on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. So this is going to be fun. I always love tech, tech people's hero's journey because they're always amazing. Having been in tech for 20 years myself, I can say this with absolute confidence. Tech journeys are just different.
We are, aren't we?
Right. So for those of you who have not watched or listened to the show before, the format of this and the subtitle of the show is The Hero's Journey for the Entrepreneur's Soul. And as such, I'm taking 5 out of the 16 steps or waypoints or interest points out of the hero's journey that was promoted by Joseph Campbell. And those 5 points that we're talking about is the ordinary beginning, because nobody is ordinary, the call to action, what got you out of the ordinariness, so to speak, the big hairy monsters, because everybody gets to play with big hairy monsters and we all get changed by big hairy monsters. So that's what provides interest and story to life. And then 2 things that I think are really important for entrepreneurs, and that's allies, guides, mentors, coaches, people who supported the entrepreneur, people who gave advice, because we never do it by ourselves. There is no part of the entrepreneur's journey that is in solitary confinement. At the very least, you need a customer to buy the product or service. So you got to have people. And then finally, what's called the journey home. And that has to do with the way that people who are not entrepreneurs who are in your life deal with you being this strange bird called an entrepreneur. Very weird thing. For those people who aren't entrepreneurs, it's almost inconceivable how we all do it. And we're slightly crazy, which, yes, we are. So, Anke, what was your ordinary beginning?
Yeah, I don't even know whether there is one. I really don't. Right. Yeah, but I think the ordinary beginning was literally growing up in East Germany, and
Wow.
But it didn't really. I guess there was sort of that first round of, I think that's the first thing that jumped to mind when you were explaining the intro, and I'm like, I don't even know which one to, because it felt
right
that there's more than one iteration of this. But in the context of entrepreneurship, my ordinary was I'd stumbled into software development. I'm a linguist. I'm a translator by training, right? And when I moved to Australia, I was told, oh, Sydney is so multicultural, like you'll be fine. You're gonna find a job, no problem. And it turned out to be wrong. Like it was difficult to find a job, and I still look back to that job as the worst paid and most stressful job I ever had.
Right.
So I knew quickly that I wasn't going to last in that industry. So I literally sent my resume out to anybody who would have it, and ended up by accident in a software development company. I'm like, ooh, programming, coding, that's cool. That's just like a real language, just simpler, right?
Yes,
So,
exactly.
I took to it, right? So basically, with a bit of encouragement and quite a lot of encouragement from people around me, it was like, hey, you could get a job at this. And I'm like, oh no, I'm too old, I'm a woman, I'm not technical, the whole thing, right? And in the end, curiosity won. And I'm like, you know what? Let me just try it. Let me just do this exam. And that was in the 90s, right? You could just do an industry exam and you could get a job kind of thing. So I did that, and I stumbled into this and really took to it. So my normal was really like, okay, I was having software development jobs in banks, and then I started contracting, and then I was in Sydney, and everybody thought, oh, if you've worked in London, like in the city of London, like then you've really made it. So I moved to the UK, I worked in the city of London, and I was just pottering around there, like I was like trotting along from one contract to the next. What was planned to be 6 months turned into 5 years, but that was my normal, right? So that was it.
Wow. Wow. Yes. I come from a comparative literature background and got into programming that way. So similar thing, language is language. Structure is structure. It just, the best programmers that I know came from English degrees, history degrees, comp lit degrees, linguist degrees. I know another linguist who got into program design. So yeah,
Makes sense.
A beautiful thing. So what was your call to action? What booted you out of the software development?
Well, what booted, it was a gentle boot, really, because because I wasn't unhappy, it was just, there was something that I noticed, that all the whole industry was shifting towards, oh, we need to outsource these projects, right? So, and more you could see there were plenty of opportunities, but they all seemed to push me into a project management kind of role, right? And I had quite an allergy against those, because when you kind of hands-on, and when you like to write code and to literally physically create something, right, sitting in meetings with Indian outsourcing company isn't your idea of a perfect job, right? So I kind of could see there was a bit of a disconnect, and while there was opportunity, I didn't like the shape of it. And on top of it, there was also that sense that the IT bubble had burst a bit, right? And all of a sudden there was that kind of the word restructuring was hanging in the air a lot, right? And I thought, you know what? I don't want to spend the rest of my working life dreading somebody coming into office and dropping that restructuring bomb, and you sit there wondering whether your job's going to be scrapped in the process of that. And I was thinking, I was like late 30s at the time, and I thought, you know what? And now it's still, okay, you just call somebody and you get another project, right? But I'm thinking, do I want to be in this position 10 years from now, right? When you then know that your resume lands on the desk of some 25-year-old and he goes, what's this old git wanting here? And I didn't want to apply for programmer's job at 50. And so I thought, no, don't really like the way this is going, right? It's still okay now, but I don't like the way this
goes.
There's
this horizon.
Exactly, and I do have, if I have one thing, I have kind of nose for changing tack before I hit my nose against the wall. So, and it all kind of blew, it the bubble burst, or I was kind of propelled into action, if you want to call it that, when I decided to take a bucket list trip to Peru. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to be out in the middle of nowhere. It was going to be off the beaten track, and I'm going to have a better time if I just knew some Spanish. And so I started to learn Spanish just for the fun of it. And on the way back, I just then kept going. I did the whole course thing. And, you know, what do you do with a finished Spanish course? You go to Spain on trips.
Right.
And
Right.
so in one of those trips, I went to Granada in the south of Spain. And I still remember myself wondering, like, there's something in the air here. There's some, I don't know, there's some magic. And
It called.
I noticed myself thinking, you know what? I'd love to live here.
Right.
And I thought, you know what? I've traveled so much while I was like, you know, in the years I was living in London, I traveled an awful lot. And then there were loads of places. Oh, it's nice. I'd quite like to come back here one day, but I never had that feeling, you know what? I'd love to live in one of those little whitewashed houses. And the cobblestones and the veggies stand on the market square in the middle of the village. And you know what? Why don't I?
Why not?
Exactly. And I thought, you know what? Why shouldn't I? And the next question then was, okay, what would I do for a living? And I thought, well, okay, finding a programmer's job in Spain, not sure whether I could get one, definitely not sure whether I want one. So the next question was, if not that, what would I, like, if I didn't have to worry about anything more, what would I do?
Right.
And I was like, okay, well, right now I'm cutting a summer dress with polka dots and ruffles, and I've got flamenco music playing in the back. I'm like, you know, that's what I would do. I'd have a sewing studio, and I'd have a little, you know, I'd do made-to-measure outfits. Okay, so what exactly does get in the way?
Yeah.
And I'm like, you know what? I can't think of anything, you know, and whatever could be in the way isn't something that could be researched. So I thought, well, you know, I don't know what this is going to be. I have no idea whether I'll even like living in Spain. I have no idea whether this crazy business idea has any legs. But I do know I don't want to look back in 5 or 10 years or whatever, wondering what life in Spain would have been like.
Right.
And so I thought, oh, okay.
And you had that voice, or that calling, or that intuitive nudge, whatever you want to call it, that was saying, here, right here, this is where I'm going to be. And you got to listen to that voice. You know, Joseph Campbell talked about that. If you don't listen to that voice, you're going to be really miserable. So good for you for listening.
Yeah. And it's true. It's actually there's a book I stumbled upon by a lady called Ronnie Ware. She's an Australian lady, and she was a nurse, and she worked a lot with people in their, you know, dying stage. And she started interviewing them, and she started asking them, and wrote a book about it. The top 5 regrets of the dying.
Yes.
And not having lived their dreams, not having listened to that voice.
Yes.
Yes. Regret number 1. And I thought, I don't want that for me. I just want, you know, if I fall on my face, if things go horribly pear-shaped, I don't care, but I don't want to have that.
Right. Right. Exactly. So what were, besides the not knowing, which is a big hairy monster for a lot of people, right? Because there's some people who just can't go through life without believing that they know what's going to happen next. They don't know. I'm here to tell you, anybody who believes that they know what's going to happen next, just look at March of 2020.
Exactly.
Let's talk about that. But there were big hairy monsters, I'm sure, that you got to play with that were obstacles, whether they were people or things or thoughts. What were some of those?
Oh, yeah, loads of hairy monsters. I mean, uncertainty isn't one of mine. I think I've sort of seen that earlier, that illusion, that certainty is always an illusion.
Yes.
You know, so there is no such thing. Like literally now, we don't know what's going to happen a second from now. We make our best guess based on what we know, but it's a guess,
Right.
no more, no less. So that wasn't the problem. And I wasn't sure whether this whole business thing was going to work. I guess it was a lot harder to get off the ground than I expected, right? Because I noticed it many years later that the story always sounds, oh, and then I started to make dresses, and next thing I know, I'm kind of burnt out, right? But it isn't actually, that part actually skips about 15 months of me scratching my fingernails on school doors.
Right.
Trying to offer my services, and there was always the same reaction. Oh no, oh, we don't need a dressmaker, right? We already, no, we don't need anyone,
Right.
go away.
Right.
Or it was, oh yeah, we always have use for a dressmaker as long as you're really good, really fast, and don't charge anything. Right? So, and there was a lot of disappointment in the sense that people on that first trip on a holiday, I'd been in that school and I thought, oh, they'll be really supportive. Oh, they just literally kicked me out of the office, when I suggested to sell some skirts there. Not a lot of, no support really. And so it felt impossible for a very long time, right? And I guess there was a little bit of stubbornness and a little bit of I don't want to crawl back to London, right. Saying I haven't sold a single thing, right? So, there was a lot of stubbornness on my part, but I just kind of kept going. And it took literally 15 months until a friend of mine said, hey, I'd sold a couple of, but nothing really. And then a friend of mine took me, she said, hey, come along, I'm taking classes in this school and we're, watch me dance. And so I went there with my that's the thing, when you have no experience, I didn't have any fancy photos to show. I actually had, my resume was a little bag of a few things that I made. When somebody goes, oh, so what have you made? I would pull out, have you got somewhere to change? I would pull out my little dress and I'd put it on and say, this is what I made, right? Do you like it? And so I did that. And the owners of the school go, oh, so you sew, that's interesting. Can you make a couple of alterations? And the third week, they say, hey, I wanted to ask you something. Can you make 12 outfits for this performance we have coming up in a month? And he goes, yeah, I know it's very short notice, but, and I'm like, yep. And I had no idea what I'd said yes to. I'd never made 12 outfits in my life before. I had no idea what to charge. I looked back at this and so this was almost embarrassingly low. But I did the 12 dresses. I never saw them on stage because when the curtain went up, I went to sleep because I hadn't slept in 3 days. Trying to get those finished.
Exhausted.
And so, and that was really the kickoff. That's when then somebody would ring and say, hey, I was one of these 12 girls. I want you to make something else for me. Or somebody would call say, hey, so you made the dress for my friend. Can I have one? So, and that's how it all started.
Right.
And it started very slowly. And so I didn't really see the big monster crawl up on me until much later, because I'd gone in there with this naivety that I'm grateful for, because I think it made it possible, because I had no fear of failure. It was like this crazy project, where if it worked out, it was almost a miracle. So, I wasn't handicapped on that end, but I also had no real vision in that sense. There was always I looked at the very next step. Okay, sell the very next costume, the very next dress, and no real, okay, how do I want this to work? So I just kind of kept going. And that ugly image of the frog in, when you throw them in hot water, they'll jump out.
Oh, yes.
When it slowly warms up, and that was me, right? It really slowly picked up. And I didn't even realize how I was building myself a hamster wheel, like a really fast spinning one.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, and so I didn't even notice it until I felt so exhausted, so under pressure all the time, because you know, I grew up Mrs. Good Girl. Like, yes was my default answer. And I had never really questioned that. So when people would come and say, hey, I need you to make me a dress, but I need it next week. And also I can't come for the fitting. I need you to bring it to the theater, you know, and that's not a problem if you already have 2 clients, right? But if you have 10 projects at the same time, that becomes a problem, right?
Yeah.
And then there was this whole, okay, you've done it for one, now you can't say no to the other one. So there was a lot of I can't say no in all of this, and a lot of pressure and mounting up until I was like, okay, I'm done. You know, we'd bump into each other in the street. You say, hey, how are you doing? And I'd burst into tears like that, you know.
Yeah.
So that was the big monster that I didn't see coming at all.
Right. Yeah, that's a formula for burnout. You know, yes is all very well and fine, but there needs to be yes and this boundary and this boundary. Yeah. Well, bless your heart. So what got you from dressmaking to taming the tech monster?
It's all the same thing. Well, it was literally that. Don't laugh, I don't mean that seriously. It's well, I guess, I mean, it was basically the whole blow up happened in 2012. There was that one performance that had me realize that, hey, you really messed up here. And it was that big performance, you know, there was some 50 odd dresses for a school, and it was ending up, I was ending up like 4 days, 3 nights with 20 minutes sleeping on the floor next to the dog, so I wouldn't be so comfortable to just wake up too late, and so exhausted. And then there was 2 of the dancers that went on holidays afterwards without paying what was still outstanding. And that was literally where even I said, hey, wait, like, this is it. I'm done. I'm over this. I'm just so done with it. And it was literally that moment where I was then thinking, well, you know what? The whole time, the reason I never considered saying no was I was kind of thinking, well, okay, if I have a service business, if somebody wants something, it's my job to give it to them, right? And I always thought I can't say exactly, right? Somebody told me. And so basically I saw, it was the first time that I saw that the whole time I didn't say no, because I thought if I say no, then they'll be upset. And, you know, it's a small world, artists, small world. So they'll be pissed off and nobody will order again and I'll be out of business, right? And I needed that total nose in the dirt kind of moment to come to a place to say, you know what? And if they all stay away, I no longer care. I needed that.
Right.
So to basically go, when next time somebody came, say, hey, I need you to come and bring this dress. And I'm like, oh, sorry, can't make that. And she goes, all right, well, okay, I'll pick it up on Monday then. You know, and that was the moment where I'm like, oh boy, that possibility had always been there. There was I blaming my pushy Spanish clients. And it was the moment that I saw that, no, the pressure had always come from my story, you know. And that was the turnaround, really, where all of a sudden sort of like, oh, yes, yeah, I can like, I cannot predict what will and won't upset somebody. So I might as well say what I really want to say, right? And it turns out everybody was happier with that, because they'd much prefer no than a stressed out dressmaker who says yes and is always running late, right? So I wasn't even delivering the service that I thought I was delivering. And then I was out of that. I thought, oh boy, if I can help one soul who kind of went in with all the enthusiasm and finds they hit some, because it's always your inner stuff that gets you, right? And so I thought, if I can help one person, give them, like, help them see through the bullshit before it really gets them to that point, I want to do that. So I went back and I did coach training, right? And I thought, well, also same thing again. I'm still good sewing now. Do I want to be 60 and still pumping out 50 dresses for a performance? Nope. You know, and so I kind of thought, okay, I'm going to transition again. We're used to that, and transition into a coaching practice. And that's what I did. And all the while, people will go, oh, I've got, I don't know, where does that button go? How do I set up this thing? How, can you help me with the tech?
Right.
And I always said, yeah, but go away, that's easy.
Right.
And that's not your problem. Like, you have bigger problems to deal with, right? And I say, for example, if you think you'd rather be a good person than have a lot of money, try charging your client. That's a much bigger problem, right? Than how to set up a button somewhere. And people kept asking, and I was pretty thick. It took a long time to actually catch on that I have a whole area of expertise and experience that can really be useful for somebody. So that's how and Taming the Tech Monster is the title of the book. I published. It's a COVID book. I published it last year. And so that's how the Tech Monster Whisperer was born. I was basically stepping into, sort of coming around full circle.
Right.
And basically just bringing all the experience, like, the creativity from, and the business stuff and the tech stuff, and, basically bringing it all to the table now. Yes,
absolutely. It's when the customers start knocking on your door and saying, please, please, please. You don't have to go through that 15-month agony. And it was a good thing that you did.
That's the thing. Yeah.
If you hadn't had that experience, you wouldn't have had the impetus, perhaps, to go into coaching and really have the experience, the empathy of what the coaches are going through. And yeah, it's great.
Yeah. It's true. I've sometimes thought, oh, did I really need to do this to me? Like, couldn't I have skipped? But no, obviously it was a necessary stepping stone to, to get to anything is always a stepping stone for the next thing. Right.
Yeah. So how do people in your life who aren't entrepreneurs and are, well, certainly I know that people who aren't techies react to folks who actually understand tech as being some kind of mysterious alien. But as an entrepreneur, that's a different flavor of alien. I don't know, maybe there's a book in there, techies are from Mars and entrepreneurs are from Jupiter or something.
That's a great one.
Yeah, so how did folks react to you?
My parents still have no clue what I do. And it's interesting because, see, my parents are both very much employees. Obviously they're retired now, but we've had this conversation. It's really interesting because my mom goes, I don't know how you do it. Right? She goes, I really don't know how you can live without knowing where your next paycheck comes from, right? And how you can live not knowing what you're going to do next month, right? And I'm like, what's funny? I feel the same about you, right? I'm like, when I look at, she used to work at a hospital, right? And so she, she was running like lung tests and stuff. And I said to her, look, for me, that idea of you already know what you're going to do, like years down the line, and every day it's like you come in one day, it's the same door, it's the same people, it's the same thing. It just kind of, I feel sort of suffocating just thinking about it,
Horrifying.
And yeah, exactly. So I think the only problem is, there's only a problem with any of it is if you're my mom and you get shoved into my role, or if you shove me into my mom's job, right? That's going to be horrible. But if everybody gets to do their thing, then yeah, I mean, people, I mean, even my ex-colleagues and my bosses, right, at the bank, when I resigned to go off to Spain and make flamenco dresses, they basically looked and said, well, we kind of knew you were nuts, we just didn't think it was that bad. Right. So everybody was, I mean, the old, I don't know, like, okay, well, I hope it goes well, this kind of disbelief. And then, years later, I always knew you'd make that. I always knew you'd make it, right? So in the moment, people was like, well, some openly said you're crazy. And there's often like, how can you how can you throw all of this away? And, how can you, and I never felt like I'd thrown anything away, especially looking at, how it's all coming around full circle, like not a single thing was thrown away. So yeah, I mean, I see it a lot with clients too. It's quite common that people aren't really supportive. Some are, okay, some basically pretend to be supportive, but actually they're not. They say they're supportive, but then, I thought you'd come over, and then you say, well, I have kind of work thing. And they kind of that sort of slight. And I think most of the time it's their own fears that come, like especially close people, if it's partners or, it's that, how will my role here change? And how will the relationship change? There's a lot of that coming in where they don't really want you to change too much.
Yes, that's a book all in of itself. Entrepreneurs and the people who think they love them.
You come up with a bunch of good book titles here.
Yes, another point on my life history was being in the what I call the publishing industry for a while. So yeah, I always think of titles and book ideas and things like that. So yes, when you talk about leaving the bank behind and people are like, oh, you're throwing that all away. From my perspective, I described it as I escaped the quicksand.
Totally.
Right.
That's so true.
Stuff that was sucking me down into blandness and conformity. And no. Yeah. There was nothing.
And I actually, and I think I always, exactly, and I actually, oh my God, how can you kind of give up a safe job? And I'm thinking, you know what? One of the things I actually wanted when I left the job, and I got that, I wanted way more job security, right?
Yes.
Because there I was always one restructuring thing away from losing a job. And I knew that with age, it would get harder and harder to pick up another project.
Absolutely.
Right? So I thought I want to be at least have the autonomy and the, to sort of be at the helm. If it goes pear-shaped, but then I have the autonomy and the power to say, well, okay, if this doesn't go where I want, I can just change tack and go somewhere else. Not if you're in a company where sometimes I can see that this goes against the wall, but then you have your hands bound, you haven't got the authority to do things your way. And so I wanted to be able to do things my way, and I'm happy to eat the consequences. But I really found like I've got a lot more, I can be a lot more nimble, a lot more agile. Like if this doesn't work, then I can do something else, right? Yeah. Where I'm not depending on somebody giving me a job or not.
Right. Well, like I'm going to go into coaching and I'm going to coach and, all of these people are knocking on my door to do tech. Let's pivot and do that. Where can you do that in a regular job? That's just not going to happen. And, I don't tell your mom, but I hate to tell you, but hospitals restructure too. And, they lay off people, maybe not right now, but they lay off people pretty frequently. So, yeah.
And she's experienced it because when she first moved to Ulm, where they're living now, she had temporary contracts for years until they gave her a permanent contract. Right? Yep. So it wasn't that secure.
Right. Yeah. So, bonus question. What is the favorite part of what it is that you do? In other words, if clients showed up and you got to do this thing every day, and it would just light you up. It's like, yep, that's perfect. Let's do it.
When things get created and people really get what they're capable of, like when like what makes me tear up when I see a client who says, you know what, I did this thing, right? And sometimes, I work with people, I mean, it depends. Sometimes they just kind of reach the limit of what they can do with the way they're doing it. So we said, no, we need to be a little more structured. So they are, oh my God, I've just launched this program, like we've just launched this whole membership. And I'm sitting out in the backyard with my husband having a glass of wine.
Yeah.
She said to me, that's what my life was supposed to look like.
Yes.
Right? That things get created and I'm not hustling like a crazy chicken. I can actually sit here out in the garden and enjoy it. And this thing runs and flourishes without me doing it all. Like that gives me goosebumps just like talking about it. And sometimes I work with people who sort of call themselves severely tech challenged, right? And when they come to me and say, oh, Dropbox, over this, that, I get anxious, just think, no, I don't even want to know. And then you see her, and she goes, oh yeah, you know, I'm doing these Zoom calls and I just live streamed it into Facebook. And I'm like,
right.
And she's saying, oh, well, actually, I kind of really enjoy this now. And I see all the things or people when they go and say, you know what I did? I got myself a new remote for the television and I programmed it all by myself, right? When she gets, you know, when she wouldn't have even, she said, you probably don't think it's much, but I would have never even tried because I was so convinced this is beyond me and I can't, you know, it's when they realize, you know what, this is an area of expertise like any other old area of expertise. When you're new, you're going to feel overwhelmed. There's a lot, things change all the time, but you've got what it takes to figure this out. Like, you know, Marie Folio, everything's figure outable. I'm saying, well, that's true for tech too. And when you see when somebody gets that and all of a sudden it starts to, oh, I didn't realize that, well, I've done that. And then because then you see how that then plays out in other areas of life, then they all of a sudden get more courageous here because this, oh, I'm no good at this. They catch their own, they start questioning it in other areas of life as well. And that's just expand. You know, when people just sort of flourish, it's just the most beautiful thing.
Yeah. Oh, that's perfect. Love it. Absolutely love it. That's fantastic. So thank you, Anke. Thank you for being on the show. I loved your story. Yes, once again, we had a fantastic tech story. I love it. And so thank you so much for being a guest on my show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's always an honor and a pleasure to chat with a fellow geek.
Yes. And thank you to all of my viewers and listeners on the sweet sound of success. What are your dreams for your business? You know what drives me crazy? Really smart business owners denying their talents because they've been taught it has to be hard, because they've been taught that they don't deserve their gifts, that they're not worth anything. They've been taught that their gender means they can't express their genius. I'm Sue Wilhite, and I want you to have access to your genius. I want you to go out and rock the world with your genius. So I created the Call to Action coaching program. It's all about getting to the heart of you and what you've got to share with the world to make a profitable business that thrives and allows you to make a difference in the world. Click the link to sign up for the Call to Action coaching program today. Don't let your genius go unnoticed.